Playing online and on smart devices. Now on London Scotty Radio, it's podcast time. I'm George Matlock. Hello and welcome to Collared, the in-depth interview series on London Scotty Radio. I'm George Matlock, and today we have a guest who has very recently, sadly, lost her Scottish Terrier. You may remember Holly. She had a dog called Monty, and Monty was famous for being in a bicycle basket, as I recall. Here to tell us more about Monty's life, he passed away in February, aged 11, is Holly. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. It's really nice to finally meet you and all your London Scotty Radio listeners. We've been meaning to come to your walk since we moved to London several years ago, and we've just never managed to be able to coordinate it. And now, of course, I'm really regretful about that. But it's nice to see everyone here anyway.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today for this. And I know that this is all very recent, what has happened. And so therefore, I think all the members will certainly share in my view that it's very brave of you to come on the programme this soon. Tell us about Monty, because I know he passed away aged 11, but he had a number of ailments, didn't he?
He did. Monty was... From 8 weeks old, Monty had a huge catalogue of different conditions, some of them really nasty, and some of them quite easy to live with. But every time we went to the vet, it would take half an hour for the vet to read through his notes before we could even start.
Wow.
Monty, we got him when he was 8 weeks old.
Yeah.
And pretty soon after we had him, as soon as we had his jabs and we took him outside, we started to notice that when he was really excited, which an 8-week-old Scotty was like all the time, he started doing some strange kind of hopping, and it gradually got worse and worse. So his front legs would kind of get really rigid and he'd goose step, his back legs would cramp under him, his back would arch, and as the weeks passed, he would start to ball up and fall over. So with great terror and horror, we went over to we were in Liverpool at the time, we went over to an amazing hospital, the teaching hospital on the Wirral. And he was in there for about 8 days, going back and forth.
8 days?
Yeah, because it had got really bad, and he was panting, he was struggling to breathe. And eventually they diagnosed him as having Scotty cramp, which was just, on the one hand, it was really devastating because it's a lifelong condition and it was pretty brutal when he was young. But then on the other hand, we were relieved because the symptoms for a neurodegenerative condition that would have been horrendous. The hospital didn't really know what to do because it's thankfully becoming relatively rare, isn't it? Because you're not allowed to breed dogs with this condition. It turns out that the kennel club owners that we got Monty from were not the best sort.
Right. I was going to ask you about that. I mean,
yeah.
But before we do, I just to clarify one thing. When you first started seeing these symptoms, so you were saying this was literally 8, 9, 10 weeks into the dog's lifetime.
Yeah.
That's when you started to notice his problems, his mobility, as you said, the back legs collapsing and so on. Yeah. Did you know at that point that it was possibly Scotty cramp, or did you even know what it was? Or
no, I had no idea. I'd never. It's our first Scotty, our first dog. So I'd never heard of it before, and I didn't even know what to search for online. The hospital had never encountered it before. It's a massive teaching hospital, and they had no idea. So they were extremely interested in Monty, which is, I think, in the end was why he ended up in there so long. Or I ended up taking him for those 8 consecutive days. I didn't leave him overnight. I couldn't bear it.
So in a way, the hospital was learning from your experience, by the sound of it.
They were, and because it's a teaching hospital, they had all the Liverpool students. So sometimes there'd be kind of 15, 16 people in the room.
Right.
And the appointments would last for ages because they were all so interested in it.
I won't ask you what the bill was. I'm sure it wasn't small.
I never want to talk about pet insurance again.
Yeah. Did pet insurance pay out, though? Did they pay out when...
They did. Thankfully, they did. Until actually last year, where the monthly payments were up to £600, and they priced us out. But they did... Well, I don't know if they covered it. I don't think we broke even, actually.
Wow. So when this occurred and you realised that this was going to be a lifelong experience, that there is no cure for Scotty cramp, right? It is relatively rare. You're quite right to say that, but it is nevertheless something that only seems to afflict Scottish Terriers, as far as we know. Right. When you realised that this was going to be the way it is, what was your reaction? I mean, you had a very young dog, and sadly, these symptoms came to be right from the word go. A lot of people say, well, Scotty cramp doesn't often show itself until at least a year into the life of the dog, and yet you were already having to deal with this reality from the very, very start. How did you feel about that?
I think it was quite... there was kind of a dual reaction. The first one was, devastation, because this little thing was suffering. But then, on the other hand, and what I'm realising now that we've lost him, was that Monty and I especially, bonded at such a profound level, because from, when we got him, obviously... it was the best thing that's ever happened to us, and we had this beautiful thing and we completely adored him straight away. But then he became utterly dependent, and I think he was put on a lot of medication, and we've constantly had to go back to the hospitals, maybe every 2 weeks or so on, because it's morphed into other things as well.
Right.
And what's happened? I think what happened is just because of that, because of his dependency and my caring responsibilities, I bonded with him at such a profound level that, it was awful that he had these things, but at the same time we became so close that, So we went back to the owners, who, the breeders, and we said what happened. We went through the kennel club, and they sent a terrible reply.
Oh dear.
And... because I think to get Scotty cramp, both parents need to have the condition. It's not... Right. So I guess they could be carriers, but I mean, the breeders would have known, and, it was so unethical to do this. But then in the end, I just thought, well, there's nothing we're going to do about it. Thank goodness he's with us. Thank goodness I have him. And I know that I'm going to look after him, and we're in a position to look after him. And
which you did. But without obviously naming the breeder, we'd rather you didn't. But tell us, if you would, when you say they sent you a nasty reply, do you mind us asking what that was? Or what was it that upset you? Because I find it, frankly, surprising and shocking that anyone would send anything back other than a letter of sympathy. So what exactly, do you mind us asking, did they say in their letter?
It was astonishing, actually. It was first saying, you're lying. There's nothing wrong with him, and
well, the Liverpool hospital can probably bear that out, that's not the case. Okay. First line of that's been knocked down. Okay.
Yeah, that was the first thing, and the second thing was, you've obviously fabricated it to try and get the money you paid for him back, and I wasn't in a position to.
So the doctors are liars. Is that what they're saying? The doctors who diagnosed this were liars and were in concert with you to try and extort money.
It's crazy,
wow.
Isn't it?
When you think about that, it could have been a very serious matter of defamation. What actually happened? Do you mind me asking, how did you respond to this letter?
So, so that I would have responded in with lots of anger. So I went through the Kennel Club in the end, and I think it's a long time ago now. I think they were struck off. I'm not sure. It was such a long time ago, and there was so much going on. But there wasn't. I think they got in trouble, and they weren't allowed to. Well, you can't stop them breeding anymore, but they wouldn't be able to, be members of the Kennel Club.
Yeah, they wouldn't be accredited, exactly. So presumably the Kennel Club took action, whatever that was, but they took action against this breeder. Yeah. Right, okay. Well, at least it's good to know that the Kennel Club takes these things seriously, and it is just very sad that the breeder decided not to take you seriously, and if anything was trying to complicate matters by making insinuations that easily you could have demolished. But you chose, I presume, not to fight them, right? You went just to report this to the Kennel Club.
Yeah, I think I just didn't trust myself to not get really upset and angry, and kind of escalate things in an awful way, because it was so upsetting. Yeah. Initially, I think the hospital were great. They sent over all the documentation and their diagnosis and so on, and they just stopped replying to us anyway. So.
Now, I don't know if you felt bullied by the breeder in a sense by the strength of their rebuff, but I know that a number of organisations would probably be able to help. And those listeners who may be experiencing or have experienced a similar situation. So if anyone out there has been basically treated or mistreated by a breeder, having brought a serious matter like Scotty Cramp to their attention, there are organisations who would support such owners. And if anyone has any questions on that, they're very welcome to contact the London Scotty Club. We are not lawyers. We can't obviously intervene or mediate, but we might be able to at least point people to the right third parties who can help them. Just something for listeners to sort of bear in mind if they're sort of thinking the same thing as I am thinking, which is that really it deserves some kind of a further response. But at least the Kennel Club did their bit, and that I think is already a really important development. So thank you for telling us what happened there. Right. So now, Holly, as I understand it, Scotty Cramp wasn't the only thing that afflicted Monty in his 11 years. Monty. No, tell us more.
I think the vet quite early on said, his immune system is not good. So he got everything continually that a dog can get, all sorts of one-off, strange, bizarre ailments that would come and go, almost monthly. We were in with some new strange thing. But the big thing that happened, and I don't know, I did quite a lot of research into this, but I'm not a scientist and I didn't really understand a lot of it. But when he was about 6. The things that usually happen when he goes into a Scotty Cramp episode, like very stiff legs, a lot of panting, his ears back. He went into one of these little episodes, and I thought, okay, he's got Scotty Cramp, and I gave him one of his tablets, and it got worse and worse, and it went into a full-blown hour-long epileptic fit. It was just one of the worst things that I've ever seen. And we went back to the Wirral, and he got diagnosed with epilepsy. And I know that the production of, or what happens with Scotty Cramp, it's kind of serotonin production transmission issue, is very different from what happens in epilepsy. The two, for me, were so similar that I was sure that one was kind of leading to another, maybe. I know in epilepsy you can have it can be. It can start later in life because you've either got like an infection in your brain or a scarring in your brain, or and with the vets, we were wondering whether the cramps and those continual episodes, because he had them all the time, whether it kind of scarred his brain in some way, that it had now initiated or developed into this horrendous epilepsy. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. His episodes, they would start up over 45 minutes of panting.
45 minutes?
With the actual fitting would last for over an hour.
Oh my goodness.
And the vet always said, you have to bring him in because the only thing we can do is to knock him out. But you couldn't, because the only way that you could get him out of it was to, turn off all the lights, all stimulation, and to rub his back in a very rhythmic way. And sing to him in a certain way, and and if we'd moved him, he wouldn't have got through it.
What was his favourite song?
It was actually his name, or Daisy Daisy.
Daisy Daisy. I know it's the 21st century. Is there something you want to tell us about Monty?
He was very complicated.
Sounds a very complicated
very
little chap. Yes. Okay. So he was a black Scottish Terrier, and you had Monty for those 11 years. It sounds like from the very start you had to deal with some very serious and punishing conditions that can beset Scottish Terriers. I think it's certainly fair to say you were incredibly unlucky that there was quite so much going on. Did you feel at any point that it was all too much? I mean, you sound like you and your partner are relatively young people. I mean, did you sort of feel, well, perhaps we should rehome him? Or did you feel no chance? No chance. Completely devoted. And even more so with his conditions, because we worked out, exactly what to do. And, there's a comfort in knowing exactly what to do as well. I mean, it complicated things because we couldn't really go away, couldn't leave him with anyone. But then it didn't complicate things because we ended up going away to dog-friendly places in this country, and that's lovely as well. You went on holidays with him,
Yeah, of course. We could, and so, not at all. I mean, we largely work from home, so we could be here all the time. So I feel actually lucky to have had him, and lucky that he found us were in a position that, we could be with him.
So you've been basically teleworking for a decade, is that right?
Yeah.
Not
COVID
bad.
with nothing.
Most of us only just about got to grips with it after 2 years, but 2 years of the pandemic. But here you are doing teleworking for the last decade. Well, good for you. Well, of course, that does help, because then, as you say, you were at home. There was somebody always there. The dog could always have attention, and Monty was not sort of left. Were you anxious in the office and worried about how he's getting on? So that obviously worked in your family, in your circumstances. And when you think about all that he went through, and I mean, were there times when you asked yourself, why is this happening to us?
And I think that's almost every time we went to the vet just said it's just not fair. We go in with a new condition. He had thyroid issues as well, and terrible skin conditions, very frequently, and the vet would just say, look, it's just not fair. Just give him a break. He needs a break. But then, he's, what Scotties are like. They're so stoical, aren't they? And
absolutely. They never give anything away. Yeah.
Nothing. So he was fine. As far as I could see, he was just fine. He's like, hi, vet. I'm back.
Yeah. Most of us will go to the GP and we'll make a fuss about whatever it is. I'm not saying we're malingering. I'm not suggesting that, but we as human beings will go to a GP and we'll usually say, "There's this not right, that not right. What do you make of it?" And sometimes we'll just be shown the door and say, "Take a couple of aspirins and don't waste my time." But but it could be more serious. It's always good to go to the GP if you're unwell and to check. And it's the same true with dogs. If they're unwell, you should always take them. And you did absolutely the right thing. But it sounds like in your case, these were real problems. These were not made up problems. The dog wasn't giving wasn't unfortunately as forthcoming about what's wrong as, say, we would be as human beings, obviously, because dogs can't communicate, they can't talk, they can't say what they're going through.
Yeah.
But it's so much harder when the dog is effectively trying to conceal the ailments, which is what I think was happening here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if he was going into a cramp, it would mean no walk. So he was not going to show us anything. And he'd keep trying to go, he'd be falling over and he'd trying to get up. It's fine, I'm fine.
And tell us,
the medication was great. Actually, he got put on. Sorry, he was put on medication. That was exactly what I was going to ask you about. So, no, that's all right. When he had medication, he had basically a life of medication. Yeah.
And how many different medications was he on?
So he got put on 3 times a day clonazepam. That was for the Scotty cramp, and it really, really helped. And if he had an episode, you could give him an extra one. And then he was on twice a day Pexion for his epilepsy. He was on Thiforin for his thyroid. He needed quite a lot of antibiotic courses for the skin conditions when it couldn't be contained. And I think with him, because his immune system was so suppressed and he had so many drugs in him that, a little skin condition within a few days would be like he'd been peeled. So, whereas, I didn't want to give him medication, and we really didn't want to give him any sort of antibiotics. We tried all the other things that you could use, lots of organic cider vinegar and so on. We did learn that if we left it for a day, he would be in trouble. So often it did, the first signs, we would just get him help. So
it was actually very intensive then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really intensive. Medicated baths every night.
Gosh. Did you have a social life at all during these years?
Well, it's all dog owners, isn't it, in the end?
Yeah, I guess.
You guys understand this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a commitment. We as humans make a commitment to a dog. You have been a model example of what that actually means. I hope and I pray that most of the people listening to this program do not have and never will have the kinds of experiences that you've had with Monty, that they've had to devote so much of their time, instead of enjoying it with their dog, actually protecting and trying to help their dog. But I know for a fact also that if any of our members were to have to do this, they would do exactly what you have done as well. I know that for a fact. They would do that. They would do the same. They would make the same commitment.
Because you get that bond, don't you? And
they're family, aren't they?
It's non-negotiable, absolutely.
They are family, they really are
family. Usually.
Don't tell your partner that. Don't tell him Monty was more important.
He'd agree.
So, my sort of endearing and long-lasting memory of Monty would be some of the photos that you shared with us. Because I never had the pleasure of meeting Monty, but the pictures that you sent were very artistic, actually. Very often depicting him in a shopping basket on the front of the handlebars of your bicycle. Do you want to tell us about that? How did that all happen?
I was a big cyclist, and Scotties aren't the greatest at running. There's too much to sniff, and then Monty had to pee on everything. Just to keep up with that, I just plonked him in when he was about 10 weeks old, and he loved it because he knew that there was a park at the end of every cycle. And we kept going. He got pretty heavy. Pretty robust creatures, aren't they? So he was quite heavy, but it was great fun.
I was going to say, how did you manage as he grew older and older? He did live till 11. How did you manage to keep balance on your bicycle with that sort of weight slopping around in the basket in front of you?
Well, luckily he was very passive in the basket. You
Right.
know, once he was in, he would just be completely still and kind of snooze. So
it just sounds like an episode out of Mr. Bean. You know, I saw this bloke trying to cycle with the front wheel sort of wobbling from side to side as he's trying to stay upright, and this dog sort of from time to time peering over the side of the basket saying, "You missed a bit. You want to go the other way."
Yeah.
and give, talk about backseat drivers, in this case, front seat drivers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a lovely bicycle. I mean, the photos are endearing, and we'll definitely make sure that one of those photographs will illustrate this particular episode of the podcast. So thank you very much for sharing this with us today.
Pleasure.
And I think a lot of people, I think, will certainly relate to what you've said here today. Is there anything from Monty's time that you particularly, anything you want to highlight, something you want the listeners to know about? Because I don't pretend to have all the right questions, but you may have the right answers.
About his illnesses?
His illnesses, or his achievements, or what he meant to you?
Oh, everything. We're really quite broken about the loss at the moment. But gradually, I guess anyone who's lost a dog, you'll relate to this, that gradually you do get the good memories, and don't sob every time you see.
Yeah, it's
see
remember
any of
the
his
good
things.
times. Exactly, remember the good times, which there clearly were many. And was it? Just remind us. Was Monty your first dog?
First dog.
First dog. Right. Okay. Now the big question that everyone therefore wants this to lead to is: will you have another Scotty?
Obviously, there's no other dog. You couldn't have another dog.
Yeah.
However stubborn.
But you will have a dog. But you will have a dog. I mean, the reason I ask, and it's not in any way a flippant or obvious question. I say it because an important thing here is that you had an experience that was a troubling one. I mean, you obviously rose to the challenge, and you clearly did everything for Monty to make him comfortable and to give him the best out of life that life could give him. But there's no getting away from the fact it was a very difficult time for you. And I was just wondering whether it would put you off, or would you simply say, well, the next one might be healthy, so let's do it again. How do you approach this?
Absolutely. And then I think now, even if, another problem developed with another dog, you can do it emotionally. You can do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely not put off. There's such a void. I think we can't fill it at the moment because it's just too big and too awful. But soon, yes, definitely will.
Yeah, well, Monty clearly made a huge impression in your lives, and that's why
everyone's
you're
life.
feeling it. Yeah, we very much hope, and everyone who's listening, I'm sure, will hope that you will soon have another Scotty in your life, that this will be a healthy one, and one that you'll be bringing to the Scotty Club walkabouts on a regular occurrence.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Holly, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you today on Collared, and we very much hope to hear your news. Please let us know through the WhatsApp group when you're ready, any news about new little 4 feet coming your way.
Will do. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening to London Scotty Radio. This and all our podcasts are available online at londonscotty.club. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe to us from your favourite podcast player app. Also visit us on YouTube for fun videos. And if you have a Scottish Terrier in London or nearby, be sure to join us.